Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are opening a source that has, well, really stained the reputation of one of the greatest political thinkers in history, Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince. When you hear that name, Machiavelli, you instantly think ruthless, cunning, maybe even evil. But our mission today is to set that sinister reputation aside for a moment and unpack the real truth of the matter that he was trying to get at. We're diving into his raw, pragmatic observations on how power is actually acquired, how it's maintained, and how it's sometimes brutally lost.
And that framing is so essential because the central shocking idea in the book is this total rejection of, idealistic theory. Machiavelli dedicated this work to Lorenzo de' Medici, and he was offering him knowledge from, and this is a quote, long experience in contemporary affairs and a continual study of antiquity.
So he's saying, I've seen things.
Exactly. And the immediate hook is his complaint that so many writers before him had picture republics and principalities, which in fact have never been known or seen.
He's not writing a moral guide. Not at all. He's writing a descriptive manual. He's demanding that we stop focusing on how men ought to live and instead observe the inconvenient reality of how men actually live.
Right. And the context matters hugely here. Machiavelli was born in Florence, 1469. He was a high-ranking diplomat for years, saw all this firsthand, and then he gets swept aside.
Imprisoned, exiled.
Yeah, when the Medici family came back in 1512. So he wrote The Prince during this bitter period of forced retirement. He'd been in the system, been burned by it, and now he was laying its mechanics bare for the world.
Or at least for the guy he hoped would hire him back.
So let's get into his core analysis of rule. He talks about hereditary, mixed, and new principalities, but he focuses right away on where the real challenge is.
The new ones. The difficulties occur in a new principality. You're trying to build stability from nothing, surrounded by people who helped you rise and, well, probably a lot more who resent you.
Exactly, and that instability forces every ruler to grapple with these two huge forces that determine success. Your own ability, what Machiavelli called virtù versus sheer fortune.
Okay, let's pause on virtù, because for you listening, we need to be really clear. When Machiavelli says virtù, he is not talking about being virtuous in the way a priest would define it, is he?
Absolutely not. It's one of the most misunderstood terms in the whole book. Virtue it's a complex mix. It's skill, foresight, strategic genius, drive, and the willingness to be ruthless when you have to be.
So it's more like masterful competence.
That's a great way to put it, masterful competence. The rulers who rise by their own arms and their own great virtue, he gives examples like Moses, Cyrus, Romulus. They build the strongest foundations because they relied least on luck. Their competence allowed them to see and seize the opportunity that fortuna or fortune presented.
So virtue is about strategic agility, self-reliance. It makes the whole structure more durable.
Precisely. And if you contrast that with, the unstable foundation of those who rise by the arms or fortune of others, the difference is just stark.
They get there easily.
They fly to the top. But they have immense trouble staying atop. They just don't have the know-how, the independent forces, or the loyalty to keep their rule going once their powerful friend is gone.
This sounds like a recipe for disaster, and Machiavelli gives us the perfect case study in failure. Louis XII of France in Italy.
Louis XII's Italian campaign is Machiavelli's masterclass in how not to do it. He lists 5 critical errors. For instance, Louis increased the strength of a greater power, the church, by helping Pope Alexander VI take over the Romagna.
So he's creating a rival right next door.
A powerful rival. He immediately upset the balance of power, and he didn't stop there. He also brought in another foreign power, Spain, to help him divide up Naples.
Which seems like a terrible idea.
It is. You should never, Machiavelli argues, bring a foreign power into your domain unless you absolutely have to, because they will become a rival you can't control.
So Louis was a perfect failure. But then Machiavelli gives us a counterpoint, a man who, despite starting with borrowed power, was brilliant at consolidating it. Cesare Borgia.
Duke Valentino.
Right, and Machiavelli basically presents him as the ultimate blueprint for the ruthless political operator.
Borgia is so fascinating because he's the perfect case study in maximizing virtue, even when you're dealt a bad hand by fortuna. He rose on the reputation and arms of his father, Pope Alexander VI, and France.
So an unstable foundation.
Very, but he saw it immediately. And he took these systematic, brutal steps to solidify his own rule. He destroyed the rival factions in Rome. He won over local support by paying gentlemen well, giving them offices.
And then we get to the really chilling part of the process, how he brought order to a lawless region.
That would be Messer Ramiro d'Orco. Borgia knew the Romagna needed a firm hand, so he brought in Dorco, a swift and cruel man, and gave him absolute power.
And it worked.
It worked. Dorco restored peace through extreme severity, but in doing so, he attracted all the popular hatred.
Which was Borgia's plan all along.
Exactly. Once the state was pacified, Borgia had Dorco publicly executed, cut in two in the public square.
That is just calculated cruelty. It's pure PR. He gets the result he wants, order, but shifts all the blame onto his enforcer.
Precisely. It secured him the loyalty of his subjects. They were both terrified and, satisfied by the punishment of this brutal governor. He looked like the merciful protector. It was a masterstroke of political theater.
So if he was so brilliant, why did Borgia ultimately fail?
Well, his failure, according to Machiavelli, wasn't due to a lack of ability. It was down to an extraordinary and extreme malignity of fortune.
Bad luck.
The worst luck.
Yeah.
His father died suddenly, and Borgia himself fell severely ill at the exact moment he needed to influence the election of the next pope. He'd anticipated every human threat, but not his own body failing him or his greatest backer dying.
This leads us right into the most controversial parts of the book. The qualities for which princes are praised or blamed. Liberality, cruelty, faithlessness. So let's hit the big one. Is it better for a prince to be loved or feared?
And Machiavelli's answer, which everyone quotes, is that since it's hard to be both at once, it is far, far safer to be feared.
That sounds good on paper, but hasn't history shown that relying on cruelty just breeds revolt? Doesn't fear sow the seeds of your own destruction?
He anticipates that,
Yeah.
and he grounds his argument in his, well, let's be honest, his cynical view of human nature. He says love is held by a link of obligation, which, owing to the baseness of men, is broken at every opportunity for their advantage.
So love is fickle.
It's fickle. Men are self-interested.
Or fear.
But fear preserves you by a dread of punishment which never fails. It's a constant. It's a reliable motivator because it taps into our basic desire for self-preservation.
So if you have to pick one tool from the toolbox, pick the one that works every time.
Exactly. But, and this is the crucial part everyone forgets, a prince must inspire fear, but he must avoid hatred. This is the strategic line. If you cross it, you're done.
And what triggers that fatal hatred?
It's simple. Seizing your subjects' property or their women.
That's it.
That's it. And Machiavelli offers one of his most infamous lines here. It's chilling. He says, men more quickly forget the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony.
Wow. That is profoundly cynical. He's saying our financial security is a deeper driver of loyalty than family.
It absolutely is. As long as a prince stays away from their property and respects their basic civil rights, he says the majority of men will live content. So take a life only when there's a clear reason, but never touch their property.
This suggests that managing public perception, the appearance of virtue, is almost as important as the reality of your actions.
Appearance is everything. And this is the new prince's dilemma. To hold on to the state, you're often forced to act contrary to fidelity, friendship, humanity, and religion.
You can't always be good.
You can't, but you must always appear good. This requires the prince to know how to disguise this characteristic, and famously, to learn how to imitate the fox and the lion.
The lion to scare the wolves, the fox to recognize the traps, strength and cunning.
You need both, because the lion on its own is easily trapped, and the fox on its own can't defend itself from brute force. To survive in a world where men are faithless, you have to be a mix of terrifying power and shrewd deception.
And his prime example of a deceiver was Pope Alexander VI.
He praises him for this, yes. He says Alexander did nothing else but deceive men, and he always found victims. He always succeeded because he understood that the vulgar, the common people, judge by the result, not the means. If a prince wins and holds his state, the means will always be considered honest, and he will be praised by everybody.
Let's shift to security. Machiavelli lays down a foundational rule. The chief foundations of all states are good laws and good arms. Let's start with the arms. What are good arms?
Good arms are the prince's own forces. Mercenaries and auxiliaries, he says, are unequivocally useless and dangerous.
Hired guns.
Hired guns. They're unfaithful, ambitious, without discipline. Their only motivation is a trifle of stipend, so they'll flee in battle or just become robbers in peacetime.
This point must have been deeply personal for him, seeing what was happening in Italy.
It was his core diagnosis of Italy's political sickness. He says Italy's ruin was caused by resting all its hopes on mercenaries. He gives this visceral example of how the King of France seized Italy with chalk in hand.
What does that mean?
It means the French army met so little resistance that their quartermasters only needed chalk to mark the doors of the houses where their troops would be staying. There was no real fight. The mercenaries just folded.
And auxiliaries forces borrowed from allies are even worse.
Arguably, yes. A different kind of danger. If you borrow troops and you lose, you're undone. But if you win, you're now the captive of your powerful ally. He says a wise prince would rather lose with his own men than win with someone else's.
So once you have military security, you still have to deal with internal politics, avoiding being despised and hated. Which brings us to the nobles versus the people.
Right, the civil principality. And he's crystal clear. It is far harder to rule with the support of the nobles than with the support of the people.
Why is that?
The nobles see themselves as your equals. They're ambitious, they want to oppress the people, and they're constantly looking for a chance to replace you. They're rivals in your own government.
Whereas the people,
Conversely, just want not to be oppressed. Their goals are modest. It's much easier to satisfy their simple demands than to satisfy the endless ambition of the elite.
So popular support is the ultimate insurance policy, which I guess ties into his final point on defense. Fortresses.
Exactly. He asks, are they useful? And he concludes, they're only useful if you fear foreigners more than your own people. But if your people hate you, fortresses are useless. An angry population will just open the gates for the invader.
So the best fortresses.
The best possible fortress is not to be hated by the people. It's a powerful, simple, strategic insight.
This whole deep dive really forces you to see Machiavelli not as some kind of devil, but as a political engineer, someone obsessed with adapting actions to the spirit of the times to succeed in a brutal world.
And we have to come back to fortune. He compares fortune to a raging river. Its power is terrifying when it floods. He admits that half of our actions are governed by this unpredictable force, but the other half is left to us.
We can prepare.
We can build defenses and barriers in the quiet times to channel the flood when it comes. He points to Pope Julius II, who always succeeded by being impetuous because the times favored boldness. But, Machiavelli warns, if the times had required caution, that same quality would have ruined him. The key is adaptation.
And the final tragic example of this is in his life of Castruccio Castracani. Here's this valiant man who overcomes everything through sheer virtù.
Only to be struck down by a sudden chill, a fever, right after his greatest victory. It just shows how even the most capable person is ultimately a subject of that malignity of fortune.
That's the complex reality he insisted we look at, that messy place where human will and pure chance collide. So here's a final thought for you to carry forward from this. Considering these eternal tensions between the ruled and their rulers, what modern-day scenario best reflects Machiavelli's principle that true prudence is knowing how to distinguish the character of your troubles, and for choice, to always take the lesser evil? Because, as he warns us, no government can ever choose a perfectly safe course. Thank you for joining the Deep Dive.